in the state of Texas. Sam Kahn, theathletic.com. We had a great time to start the show, Sam. You and Justin Williams in your Big 12 preview. I love the article and the tiers of how you broke them down. Which team was the hardest for you to perhaps place in a tier?
I think Baylor was. That was the one I struggled with the most because I think they belong where we put them. But and I would say it's not just Baylor. I would say Baylor, Oklahoma State, I think are both in a similar spot where they had underwhelming years last year when we had higher expectations for them. Mm-hmm. And so to what degree do those teams bounce back? Are we talking about they win a couple more games, or are we talking about they're a Big 12 title contender? And I would even say to some degree, I think TCU was a struggle to rank because I think some people would argue maybe they deserve to be in the top tier just based on the respect of what they accomplished last year and how they reloaded. But I do think that you have to take into account the amount of production they lost. So I would say that there was certainly several that I think we had trouble with. But I would say, yeah, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and TCU would have been the hardest ones for me.
Sam, who from the bottom tier would be the biggest surprise to you if they, I'm not saying won the conference, but had a smooth sailing this year, more or less?
I think it's Houston. They're the team that I think I have the most concerns about. And it's funny because West Virginia, I think, was ranked last in the preseason poll. And I honestly, I don't know why. Maybe it's Neil Brown's confidence that maybe is taking exception to that, but I have a feeling West Virginia is going to be a little bit better than that. I don't see them finishing the bottom of the conference. I think all four of the new teams are going to have a little bit of an adjustment period as they get into this Big 12 schedule. And it's not the competition per se, but it's the depth. It's what happens in week 8, week 9, week 10 when you're playing these Big 12 teams that have been recruited at a Big 12 level for years and years, and you are just now doing that. And I look at Houston as a program where I have questions on the offensive line. How good are they going to be up front? Losing Alton McCaskill in the portal, I think, was a big blow because that's the kind of a player you need in the Big 12. And then defensively, they were just so bad last year. I do think they have a lot of talent on D, and I do think they have a lot of potential on D, but they just fell off the map after being one of the best defenses in the country in 2021. So they're the one that I have the most questions about. And if Houston were to come out and go 8-4 in their first year in the Big 12, I think it'd be pretty shocked.
I think your initial comments about Baylor, we struggle with that. And when I say struggle is that I'm of the opinion, I'm always one of those that's more conservative. You want to get back into a bowl game. Well, that needs to happen because otherwise that's 2-7, 12-2, 6-7 bowl team, but you lost. And then if you don't get to a bowl, that would be obviously disappointing. I get a quiet sense that the coaching staff is very confident in this team. And I think most are, but I kind of get the feeling they're very confident in what they've been able to put together. Brigham Young, 8-5 last year, had a 4-game losing streak. All 5 losses were 3 or 4 of them were very close. They also had some close wins. What do you expect from them if Keaton Slovis can just play pretty well?
Yeah, if he can play well, that would certainly help. This of the 4 newcomers, this is the one you would suspect would be most ready to play this kind of schedule, right? Because they have played a schedule that's closer to a Power 5 schedule than any of the other 3 newcomers. So that you have that helps a little bit. They've just got to get better defensively, and certainly they made a change on that side of the ball. So that's really where I want to see them get better is can they get a lot better defensively? And Slovis, how quickly does he come along? How quickly do they develop? And how quickly do they mesh as an offense? But I would not be shocked if the BYU is a team that if they won 7-8 games, it would not stun me at all just because they are used to a grind that's a little bit tougher than Houston or UCF or Cincinnati.
Sam, you have Oklahoma in the top tier, and they've got to earn their way back, right, to what they were. But they appear to have at the top level of their roster a lot of guys who can hang. But they are going to have to stay healthy, aren't they?
Absolutely, no. There's 100%, and I think if you would ask the coaches there, they would tell you that the amount of depth on the roster that was left there when they took over is not what they suspected that it would have been. I thought they did a really good job in the portal this year in this offseason. They added a lot of impact defensive players that I think are going to help. And then I love how they recruited. I mean, they got some real big-time players in the recruiting class, obviously a top 5 recruiting class. I think they do have to earn it. And as we place these, we talked about who do we struggle with. I did struggle with Oklahoma a little bit too, because they did fall off so badly last year. And I was at Red River when they lost 49-0, and I know they didn't have Dylan Gabriel for that game, but my goodness, they were bad. I had never seen an Oklahoma team look that bad. And so that was a little jarring for me, but I think I still place them in the top tier based on just frontline talent. I do think they're gonna rebound to a degree, and I do still have a belief in Brent Venables. I think this is a big year for him, but he's a guy who has been obviously successful years at Oklahoma as an assistant and part of championship teams at Clemson, and so he knows what it looks like. And I think that was a great hire for them in the long term, because he's going to a place in the SEC where he's already had to win recruiting battles against those big SEC powers, because that's the waters that Clemson was swimming in recruiting. So I think long term, I think he's going to get that program where they need to be, but certainly they need a big bounce back year, because, brother, Oklahoma fans are not used to being 6 and 7. I can promise you that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Obviously, they're not. It had been since the year before Stoops took over. My question is, and Craig's brought this up, he's a lifelong Oklahoma fan. They're moving into the SEC, and they should at least bounce back. But how many fan bases excited about the new conferences, the amount of money that their schools are going to get, even though the fans get none of that, unless it leads to NIL money, because it means better players. But how many are really like set to know that you might go 8-4 more often than you go 12 and let's say 10-2?
That's the thing. That's the fascinating part about it, because it is such a grind in that conference at the top level. Because when you're playing, right now in the Big 12, there's a lot of good teams from top to bottom, and the grind in the Big 12 is tough. But it's the top tier of teams is not at the level that Alabama and Georgia and LSU are. And if you're playing multiple of those, and then you're also playing a quality non-conference opponent, boy, that's a hard grind. And you're also now recruiting against those teams. So if you finish 4th in recruiting in the country, which I think that's what Oklahoma finished this last year, guess what? That's also 4th in the SEC. Yep. Because Alabama and Georgia and LSU recruited ahead of you. So that is one of the things. Like, as we saw A&M go to the SEC, that was one of the biggest adjustments for them. Is, okay, sure, we have a top 10 recruiting class, but if we rank 8th in the country in recruiting, we may be 6th in our own conference, because that's the level you're recruiting. Those are the level players you're seeing every week. That is a hard adjustment, and it's going to be a hard adjustment for those fan base. But the question I have is, how do you measure success? Because winning conference titles at the clip that Oklahoma did in the Big 12, that's just not going to be a reality in the SEC because of how deep it is, or how stacked it's going to be at the top. But are you going to be okay with making the college football playoff on a consistent basis? Because that to me is essentially the bar for success for everybody. If you're not winning a national championship, if you're not Alabama, or you're not Georgia, or you're not Ohio State, I think that bar, and Oklahoma, considering their history, you would consider them with those programs, but is getting to a college football playoff consistently in the 12-team field good enough? And that's the question I have for Oklahoma fans, and how does that look if they're able to do that enough, but they don't win a title for the next 5 or 6 years?
Well, I mean, I think, and I don't know if fan bases will realize this, Sam, but trying to finish 12th is going to require a lot less stress than trying to finish 4th every year. Yep. So I do think ultimately that most schools, especially the ones that are like Oklahoma, will maybe enjoy it a little bit more. And that way, when you don't, like the couple years that Oklahoma didn't win the league, they're not walking around Norman aimlessly going, what happened? I mean, I remember when Baylor went there in 2014 and beat the brakes off of them. Bob Stoops got so mad at the local media because he was trying to explain, like, yeah, every year is not sunshine and roses. Like, sometimes things happen and you can't get out of the way.
The other guys get a scholarship too.
Yeah, but if you're trying to tell them, like, look, we're trying to get to 12th, this is a building year, then I think most fans are going to be easier. It's going to be easier on them.
Yeah, it moves the goalposts a little bit, and it's going to take, like you said, it's not a do or die situation, and that's what we're going to lose with the 12-team playoff. Is in the BCS world or the 14 playoff world, one loss could knock you out, 2 losses certainly did. Now, a 9-3 SEC team is going to have a really good shot to get in. just based on strength of schedule. And the way we know that the college football playoff committee grades these things, we know the SEC and the Big Ten teams typically get ranked higher than the other ones. That's going to probably stand true. So if you're a 9-3 Oklahoma team in the Big 12, a 9-3 year in Oklahoma is probably going to have the fans a little antsy and a little upset. But a 9-3 year in the SEC, in that 16-team SEC, you're probably feel a little bit better, and you go in that tournament having a chance. And if you're able to win a couple games, then who knows what happens.
Yeah, it's not like getting to the college football playoff is like when you became bowl eligible. That was nice because you got another game, especially if you're an up-and-coming program. But for schools that were the mega alpha dog blue bloods, that was like, well, we should get one. Now getting into the field of 12 will be kind of special. Sam, great stuff. We love the article. Fantastic job, you and Justin Williams, the tiers and more. And thanks for your time for being on the show today.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'll take care.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, coming up next, the 5 o'clock